So Jenifer, if you'd start with where have you screened the film, and kind of what are your plans for the film? What kind of reactions has the film been getting so far?
Should I use this? Actually, I have to say the reaction's been phenomenal. I mean, it was at Jacob Burns, which is where Jeremy saw it, and it sold out both screenings and had standby wait lists. It sold out at Hot Docs in Toronto, which is where it premiered, had its world premiere there. And it was at Doc NYC at the IFC Center downtown here, and again, it sold out there. So we've been having phenomenal response, mainly word of mouth. Is the strength of this film. I think people on the face of it think, five mothers in prison, I'm not sure what to make of it, but the word of mouth has been very positive and strong. So the audiences seem to be getting bigger and stronger. But I think the real future of the film is grassroots community screenings. Columbia Law School and their social work school are interested in are planning a joint screening. Harvard Law School is doing a joint screening. The Bronx Public Defenders. It's had much more of an interest in legal circles than I had expected, which is great. So if it can be a cinematic quality experience for people, obviously that's what I want. But if it can also have some positive social change at the same time, that's ideal.
So follow-up question. So what about putting it on YouTube? Because Google, we want to be our own TV channel. So would that serve what you want to achieve through this movie?
It might very well. So I would love to take your name.
I don't work for YouTube, but I can reach out to some people because we had a couple of other examples, like someone making a movie about elections in Ghana, in Africa. Mm-hmm. And sometimes YouTube is really a good distribution channel.
Exactly, and I think at the right time, that might be a perfect thing to do. So I would love to, because it's hard for people to realize why this is an important film until they get a taste of it, or until someone tells them to look at it, or till it's that kind of a thing. And once they're in, having the experience, they really feel. I mean, I made the film with the goal to make the issue and the women accessible to people, but you still have to get them to that point. So anything, I'd love you all to go home and like it on Facebook and recommend it to your friends, because it really is, it's kind of this engine that needs to kind of keep being pushed along, and then people realize that this is something valuable to learn about. So I would love to talk to you more about that.
So speaking of being accessible, Mona, thank you so much for coming. I guess my question for you is, we see you at the very, very end, finally getting out. What's it been like since you've been out? It hasn't been that long.
Well, I've been away for 25 years almost, and the world has advanced drastically. I mean, I had problems with the remote control for TV. There was no remote control, there was no internet, there was no cell phones or anything when I went away. So like little by little I adjust, but it becomes very overwhelming at times. Very fast-paced Google world.
I was going to say, we're all guilty of doing that to you.
I got a droid.
I just wanted to quickly say, I want to point out Travis is here with his mom today.
Get stand up, Trav.
And can you talk a little bit about Albion? Because that came at the end, and I know we've talked about that a bit outside.
I think in Albion, here I was in a facility for 20 years. I had my own private cell. I mean, it doesn't sound, I'm not making this place a nice place, but, you get accustomed, you get adjusted. And I was productive and constructive. I was teaching. I was, grant writing and getting money for programs. And then I get shipped up to, I don't know where. Oh, it was horrible. I mean, the whole mentality up there. Not that I have anything against farmers, but I just use that word, farmers, because they just don't get it. And so even communicating with them, trying to start something, trying to make something happen, trying to make them understand, they were just very afraid of change. I try to stress that, how important it is to have these programs for the children and, to encourage, maximum visitation between the children and the mothers, and how important it was. And they're just they didn't want to hear it. They didn't care. They just really didn't care. But it was probably the worst place I was at in my 3 prisons I was at.
And you might want to mention, they might recognize the third one. It's very near here.
The third prison where I was released from is on 10th Avenue and 20th Street. It's called Bayview Correctional Facility. It's like a minimum facility for women. And that's where I was getting out of.
So I actually had a question, which I'll preface by saying, I'm a lawyer, and I was involved for 2 years in a pro bono project at Taconic, right across the street
Right.
from
I'm
Bedford,
familiar with it.
where we would represent inmates who were trying to get visitation from their children. And most of our job, and my job at the time, was to use some combination of sweet talk and a crowbar to get the various foster agencies to agree to bring the children to Taconic for visits. And in the film, it's interesting only because I know that, in the film it's sort of like you see people lining up at the gate, but I was wondering, I'm assuming that at Bedford you have the same issues where, besides the actual visitation, it's just physically getting the kids up there in many instances. I was just wondering if that's the case.
So maybe that's a good question for Alessandra to answer.
Yeah, I'm the current director of the program, and visitation has always been one of our highest priorities. And because of where Bedford Hills is located, it is extremely difficult for the vast majority of families to get there. The foster care situation has been remediated on some level by the CHIPS program, which is a program that essentially works with foster care agencies and brings kids up on regular visits. But not nearly as many kids that we work with are in foster care as you would expect. And guardians don't have the resources, the time, the finances to get to Bedford Hills, which is hard to get. So we transportation, actually physically picking the kids up and bringing them to the prison, is among our highest priorities. That said, we started our new fiscal year in September and started the year with a 40% budget cut, and among the things that were the most affected were our transportation programs. We used to run, I think it was 46 buses a year, now we run 6. It's completely different. We have to work much harder to raise funds from outside places to compensate. And we have to turn a lot of families down. And it's a problem because you can see as our funding for transportation goes up, the visitation rate goes up. And as it goes down, the visitation rate goes down. And there's just no flexibility for the vast majority of these families.
And those are the families that actually are allowed to visit. We have people, a lot of women who are working to try to maintain, restore, initiate their parental rights, which is another whole piece, and which I had hoped to include, but it was just too difficult for obvious reasons. But I recently showed this film to family court judges at their conference, and one of the judges came up to me privately at the end and said, I'm really glad I saw this. Many times I have declined visits for a child to go see the parent because of my own preconceived notions of what awaited on the other side. So I'm hoping we can do some communication on that level as well. In fact, they're planning a simulcast for all the courts houses in New York State in family court houses to try to get a little bit of this thinking changed. So.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind, Jeremy.
No, please.
So I'm a little bit torn because through most of the movie, my reaction was the prison system is completely broken and we need to fix it. And at the end, the people who went through that successfully, I'm putting something that they didn't say in their mouth, so please, don't try to, be too harsh on me. But my sentiment was like the best thing that happens for them. It rescued them from wherever they were. So how do you reconcile these two notions? And if there is one message in your movie, which one is it? Should we try to fix the system, or should we try to play with the system and add some extra nice things around it, or should we even go further? Maybe you should create schools to teach people how to be parents before they enter the prisons.
I'm going to let Mona add to this right after. I just want to say one thing. I wrestled with this whole thing in the whole making of the film because I really have strong feelings against how we incarcerate people in this country. I do think the system's broken. I focused on Bedford because they were doing something right. And even Sister Lane said to me, who founded the program, she also wrestled with the idea, was she somehow making it more palatable, this prison system? But I have to reiterate, this is very rare. most prisons, none virtually, have a comprehensive parenting program.
No, we are the only prison that has a comprehensive family services program. You'll find pieces of our program throughout the country, indeed throughout the world. There's parenting education programs in some places. Some places have some transportation support. Some facilities have a visiting room, but nowhere does it exist exclusively, completely under one umbrella. And even in the last 6 months, there used to be 7 prison nurseries in the country. Now there's 6. They closed Taconic. So the trend is not moving in the direction of promoting this kind of setup anywhere else. It's the opposite. So
I just want to say about what he said. It's interesting what you said. You said you got mixed messages. How, in a sense, you got a message from some individuals saying how they felt like they were rescued. Yes. I disagree with that. So I think everybody's situation is different and everybody's experience is different. It's a horrible way to live. There's no denying it. And I can see some individuals saying, you know what, I felt like I was rescued. I'm offended by that, in a sense, because... Right, no, I understand. No, I'm offended. No, it bothers me that someone could, and maybe that's true for them, you know, that they feel that, you know, I'm alive and I'm in prison. Whereas me, it was horrible. I mean, it was just a horrible, horrible experience. And I think you'd be a dedicated, nurturing mother wherever you are. And I think as a parent, whether you're in prison or you're in the street, it's still your responsibility. And me and my friends who, you know, I was in prison for 25 years, and you have to find something to do, you know, else you'll be in trouble. So what we did is, you know, we were concerned mothers, a couple of us, and we said, you know what, we got to do something here. And what we did is we created curriculums, we put programs together, you know what I'm saying?
The Children's Center.
We created the Children's Center. The program, that's all from inmates getting together and, you know, having a goal and having a dream and getting their priorities together. So, you know, what's important in my life is my children. My son, Travis, I was arrested in 1985. My indictment was dismissed. I was remanded in 1987, was reinstated. When I was remanded into prison, I was 5 months pregnant with him. You know what I'm saying? So I never had Travis. My parents didn't let my son come to prison with me. You know what I'm saying? Because they were uneducated and it just wasn't a good thing for them. And so I had to respect that. So he went home from the hospital. You know what I'm saying? I had him not even 24 hours. They took him. And so our whole relationship was created in this room, in this Children's Center, which you see here, you know, where I read to him, where, you know, he taught me how to play chess, where everything, you know, I nurtured my son right in that visit room. So we had to make this happen. And I'm saddened by the fact that, you know, things are changing and a lot of people aren't going to have the same opportunities I had with my children. People that are just getting to be incarcerated and going to be there for a longer time than I have, some of them, and they don't have that opportunity. And that's why I'm here. You know, I want people to understand that, you know, yeah, you think of prison and yeah, some people belong there and, you deserve, you know, to go to prison, you're bad or whatever, but the children really suffer. Everybody suffers when someone goes to prison. The economy suffers when someone goes to prison, you know? So I just want to get that message out there, that it's different for everybody.
And the other thing I just want to say is that I think in the case of someone feeling rescued, it was a short sentence.
Yeah.
That's Melissa's father. She was gone 2 years, and she had been on a terrible drug thing. So from a dad's perspective, so I think it's a little different than the majority of women there who are there for very long, long sentences.
There are women there serving 75 years to life. I mean, if you really want to call it corrections, does it take 75 years? I mean, come on.
So if I may, this program, as I said, Mona, you created this program, not by yourself, there are a few of you, but you know, having gotten to know you and watching this again, it's clear that this happened because of the force of nature that you are, that Sister Elaine is. To Alessandra's point, that the movement right now is away from these. Right. I doubt there are too many other people out there who can do this, can do what you did. We need people like you to do these things. Are there things that you've learned when you did it? Are there nuggets you can pass on to people to say, if we want to try to make this happen, either from the outside or from the inside, how can we do it? How can we recreate? What is a success for you?
I think that people have to be educated about the whole prison. There's people that are more beneficial to the prison system that don't even work in the prison system, that the people actually run in the places. You know, from my experience, the administrations that I dealt with, they're really in a position where they really don't know what's going on. And you're a lawyer, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. I mean, I'm trying to work on a book now, and hopefully that'll make people understand a little better about my experience and about, you know, what kind of obstacles you can run into. It's just that it's just a really different life inside than it is out. It really, really is. I've only been home 8 months now. So it's just, I can't even explain it. But I just want to educate people. And you can see, like, I don't know, how do you feel about after seeing this? Did you ever imagine, that these women are human, these women are mothers, or you don't think like that, right? You never really think about prison because you never experienced it. You probably don't know nobody there. You know what I'm saying? And I was the same way. I knew people that went to prison, federal prison. I felt that people were in prison. You know what? Actually, they did something wrong. They're locked up. That's why they're there. So I never thought about the bigger picture about, these prisons, these people are mothers, and, all the other social factors, drugs and delinquency and illiteracy and all these other social factors that, take place that cause these people to wind up in prison.
But I think
And we never do. I never did.
And I think it took a combination of Mona, Sister Elaine, and a particularly open-minded superintendent at the prison at the same time. I think you need, Jeremy hit on that idea that you really need people who, at the right time, who are willing to take a risk, and that gets harder and harder to do. So, I would encourage, I actually put flyers up there about things people can do in terms of getting involved in a volunteer capacity, in a mentoring capacity, in a political capacity in terms of writing to Albany, donating. There are things we can do, but I'm just trying to just elevate and hopefully illuminate the general discussion a little bit. So hopefully that's happening with the film.
Yeah, I was wondering if everyone has sort of preconceptions and people have ideas about what might work, what might not, and even with Google, we have lots of suggestions comes up, and everything comes back to what are the numbers, what are the statistics, what's the non-emotional attack to this. And I wonder if there are any hard numbers that come out of this in terms of, lower repeat offender rates, those kind of things, that there are less emotional and easier to put down to, well, look, you're trending down these programs elsewhere. Here's a program that works, and here's the numbers that show that it works, not the emotional appeal that says that it works.
We struggle with that on a regular basis because especially when we try to look for funding, grantors really want hard data. What are your outcomes? Give me quantitative measures about the impact of your program. What's your cost per head and what's the outcome there? And we're prohibited from doing that, from capturing accurate information on a couple levels. One is because when somebody leaves the facility, I'm prohibited by the Department of Corrections from any subsequent contact with them. So they get drafted to Albion, they get released, I'm not allowed to follow up. So we work with these families for a long time, and then they go off to the next phase of their life, and I don't have any download of information, which is a problem too in terms of our programming, because it's hard for me to make relevant programming if I don't really know what they're encountering at the next step. The other part that makes that hard is that there are so many factors in, for example, the lives of these kids, and our influence is one very small piece of everything else that they're encountering. So it's difficult to quantify what benefit or negative comes from their relationship with their mother or the Children's Center involvement, and what comes from just their experience at large in their communities. And I think, too, part of what we struggle with all the time is that we don't define success in a traditional way. I would love to be able to sit here and say 85% of the kids that we touch go on to college, and of that group, 75% go to Ivy League. Well, that's not really, of course, if that happened, we'd be psyched, that'd be great. But the truth is, success for us is the squeals of laughter in the playroom. That's a valuable, life-changing experience for both the child and the mom, and you can't really quantify it, but to us it counts. And
I just want to jump in because there was the only long-term study happening out of Columbia right now, Lori Goshen and Mary Byrne, following the nursery babies. And it's win-win across the board. First of all, the kids are thriving when they get back out into the real, quote-unquote, real world. In fact, you see Emma there, who's then in kindergarten and is, doing wonderfully. And the rate of return into prison is much lower. And it's hugely beneficial. And I would blame part of the problem that we're suffering from answering this question is that researchers aren't looking at the damn problem. But I think that's changing, actually. And this study was extremely well respected, in part because what it's found, which was the biggest surprise, which is the conventional wisdom has always been if you did not attach well to your own mother. So a lot of these women who were in prison, for whatever reason, some of them had a distraught relationship, a very chaotic relationship with their mother, and didn't attach perhaps. And so the thinking always was that then you would not be able to have an attachment with your own child oftentimes. And this was not the case at all. The children were attached to the mother and vice versa in the nursery setting. So a lot of really good information came out of the study, and she continues to follow them for a long period of time. So I think that may spur other good studies that we can point to.
So, Alessandra, there's a point in the movie, I think it's when Melissa's being released, I forget, where Bobby hugs her and says, "Keep in touch, I'm here for you. If you need me, reach out to me." That does not jive, obviously, what you just said. So did things change?
Yeah, they have. There's been, in the last probably 5 years, and most intensely in the last 2, there's been a significant change in the role that docs, registered volunteers, which is how Children's Center staff are what we're called, can communicate with families after they leave.
And that seems very counterproductive.
Yeah.
Is there some movement to try to at least even change that piece?
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't worked to date, but yeah, it doesn't, like for us, it doesn't make sense on a whole host of levels, but some things are seemingly inflexible in the Department of Corrections, and you know, there's other things, truthfully, that are higher priorities for us to try to deal with on a day-to-day basis, but.
So I've volunteered and worked at the Children's Center for about 6 years now, and I've been so focused on women when they're on the inside, but this movie opened my eyes to what happens once you're released. And I'm wondering what's the stigma, because the women, I see how much they have to offer on the inside, and they're amazing in the creativity and the dedication, and they're intelligent women. And I'm wondering what it's like, Mona, when you come out and you've had such success on the inside. What's it like then on the outside?
It's a really intense feeling of hopelessness, actually, when you're so constructive and productive and creative, and then you get thrown out into this world, and you have a felony conviction. So you fill out an application, you have to I got degrees, but you know what I'm saying? Who are you going to hire? The person that was in prison for 25 years, or the person that was never arrested in their life? You know, so like right now I have a really what I call a meaningless job, secretary, just temp, actually. And, you know, I'm just making it, but it's really hard. You know, it's just really degrading, actually. You know, while you feel productive and you get out of here and you're just like, and it's interesting because when I see the film, Anithya says, you know, I just feel like I have to get out and get a job. You know, because you feel, you know, I went to school all these years and, you know, it's not going to be hard for me to get a job. And you really, and I'm wondering if everybody's like that, because that's the way I was. And, you know, I had therapy, you know, I'm feeling like I'm a therapist, and I go to therapy and just talk about, you know, the adjustment. It's a big adjustment back into society after being locked up so long. And they said, he said that I have an anxiety adjustment disorder, but it's normal. I said, well, why do you call it a disorder if it's normal? You know, he says, it's just expected. It's normal of you to have an adjustment desire, whatever, anxiety disorder. You know, no medication or nothing, but, you know, it's just a disorder that I have because I'm out. But I just want to say one thing is that I think children, regardless of where they're at or who their parents are, all they really do need is love. You know what I'm saying? Children just need to be loved and know that they're loved, and it's just still your responsibility as a parent to, you know, to see that they're educated. They're disciplined. Both of my children, thank God. I mean, what typical things, you know, tickets, cars, and stuff like that. But, you know, they're both great, thank God. You know, go to school, he's in college, and he's an engineer. My oldest son just works for my family, but they're making it, you know. And I want that for every kid. And it's clearly visible on the inside. You know, I taught parenting very long, and it's clearly visible. You can see the people that have support, moral support for the family, you know, financial support for the family, get to see their kids. They're more structured. And then the people that don't get visits, don't get packages, don't get moral support, you know, any kind of caring from the family outside, which is very common on the inside. They're more destructive. They're more, you know, have disciplinary problems and stuff like that.
It just seems like such a common sense win-win all the way around that it's, you know.
Yeah. Any other questions?
That's it.
Oh, you could ask it too, you know. So I guess the last question maybe is, what can we do, Alessandra? What can we do to help?
I think
the cause?
there's a macro, you know, solution or suggestion, and that is to, and Jen alluded to this, to advocate. I mean, really, I think these kinds of programs should exist in every prison in the country. I think it would serve all of us well to have this kind of a structure in the country. On a micro level, truthfully, we need to restore the programs that we eliminated because of the budget cuts. So, talk to your legislators, send us a check. Both of those are effective. Our programs have always been inmate-run, inmate-centered. The women know far better than I will about what their families need. And as Mona said, they created the Children's Center. As civilians, we provide the structure and the framework.
They use the phone. They can use the phone.
Yeah, we can use the phone. We can hand you the
Use
phone.
it for the phone.
Yeah.
Make a phone.
But if you feel compelled toward this, come and volunteer. I mean, the Children's Center it's really a unique place, and it evolves as the needs of the women change. And oftentimes we don't realize that we could be doing something better or differently. And so if you have an idea, if this feels like something you might be interested, come in, give us your talent, your insight, your service. I mean, that's how really that collaborating with what's going, as Rebecca alluded, there's an incredible amount of creativity and commitment bubbling on the inside. So to work together to create programs like the ones that Jen showcased is really, I mean, it's very powerful.
Great, thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Spread the word, please. Thank you.